Alright, response video back to the modern mystic who did a good 40 minutes on my video, which is good. I mean, I like when somebody responds to what I said, and but unfortunately Nick sort of evaded the question, which was, I was requesting a more detailed answer to the question. What would have happened? So if there was no debt, if no borrowing took place, if people were very careful with their money, how would the world be changed? And would it be changed for the better? And my argument would be, quite obviously, it would not be a change for the better. The only people who would have had ownership and would have been doing consuming would be the rich. The economy would be 1/10 the size it is. People would be living in abject, horrible poverty. It would have been a horror, and that's the simple truth. I mean, Nick, I'll start the video with another simple question. Can the rich get too rich? And if you're going to say no, they can't, then I'd like you to explain why monarchies always were horribly inefficient, disgusting societies, the preposterous waste, why they don't work. All right? Bottom line is that they don't work. They really don't work as a civilization. They're nonsense and garbage. And why? It's because the consumption is owned. All consumption is owned. All consumption has to serve the king. And you will only invest in what serves the king's interests. So you'll invest in an army and boats and stealing as much commerce as you can for the family of your elites to feed off of. But other than that, you'll build no social infrastructure. Nothing of value to the majority of the people existing. You won't have a great medical system. You won't go to the moon. You won't do anything great. You'll only do stupid, wasteful nonsense like build pyramids in the middle of the desert to make it possible for your king to somehow get to heaven. That's the kind of waste you'll build into a society. So in spite of the horror of this idiotic monetary system we have and the money system, the fact is we have been able to, through this debt, invest in technology, invest in a better life for a lot of human beings. We have very good health care systems. I mean, yeah, they got huge problems, don't get me wrong, but we've made innovations, we've made advances. We did fly to the moon. We built Hoover dams. We've built nuclear power plants. Certainly France has done that. So yeah, stuff has gotten done and work has gotten done, and only because we were able to still, as individuals, consume. And yeah, we did it through this debt process, and that was that big fail, because now we have notes of ownership that are in excess of the real value of the economy, and they're notes for promises 50 years from now, 50 years of labor that people just can't produce. So yeah, they're impossible for those notes to ever have the value the people holding the notes say they're worth. But anyways, yeah, so just to answer that question, can the rich get too rich? And explain if you say no, or explain why you don't think they're already there now. You marginalize this issue as if it doesn't matter. It really matters when 8,000 households take in as much wealth, money, reward, as 70 million Americans. That's a real problem when somehow 8,000 households are being declared as productive, getting as many carrots, reward carrots, as 70 million people. That's an idiotic scenario. That's an obviously destructive and unsustainable scenario, in my opinion. And for you to argue that has no meaning is idiotic. If you argue that we can't fix it that fucking fast is idiotic. We can fix the problem tomorrow. We don't need the rich. They're not vital to the economy. They're not vital to 99.9% of the human race. Will live better without them. They produce nothing. They're gigantic, huge parasites. And through their parasitic behavior, they store, they convert consumption into storage, into something that doesn't get eaten, into wheat that stays in a silo, and another silo, and another silo, like the Pharaoh. All right, just keep putting the wheat in silos so it can get eaten by rats. They turn they turn our production into garbage because they won't allow it to be consumed. They won't allow things to get consumed because they can't make money on consumption without debt. That's the only way a consumption becomes profitable to them, is if they can extract interest from the consumption, a profit from the consumption. And that's very different between two people making an agreement with each other and saying, I will produce this fish for you, you will produce the barbecue for me to cook it on, and we will have a fair exchange ultimately, in that I will do work that will be productive to you, and you will do work that is productive to me. The rich ruin the fucking equation, and to say they are meaningless to the equation now is ludicrous. Really ludicrous. The whole point is that money's a claim of ownership. And whether it's a dollar bill or a stock certificate, it doesn't matter. There's all kinds of money. So currency, government currency, is so irrelevant to the whole fucking discussion. It's meaningless. It's $2 trillion of nothing. It's a few notes that are out there. The bulk of the economy, the bulk of the notes, the ownership notes, the deeds, are in the form of stock certificates or some other deed to a house or some other deed, some other promissory note, or an IOU where somebody has to pay back money for their future work. Somebody actually has a deed to somebody's future productivity. And that's where this gets very destructive, because that should never be owned. It's preposterous for that to be ownable, the future to be ownable. And that's where these rich people break the system. So you can have some interest in an economy without it being, I mean, interest isn't, well, I'm not going to make the argument. Yes, you'll concede that it's the first mistake. But it's not a catastrophic mistake if you don't allow it to get out of control. And it gets out of control when it becomes monarchical in its nature, when it becomes interest on everything, and where it's double interest and triple interest, because you're acquiring, you're demanding a profit and interest on every single level of production, every part, and then every combination of parts, and then every laborer, and then every building, and everything. You're extracting and saying, I need more profit off of this production. And that's what's happened now, is that there's so many levels of ownership and so many pieces are owned. I mean, it's like your car being owned based on every part of it. Like the tires are owned, and the car is owned, and then the whole car is owned, and then it's these levels. And so that even makes the interest even more insidious, because when you added up all the interest that's being extracted from any whole, because of all the parts being also taxed by this demand for profit. And that's what happens. The demand for profit is what fucks the system. All right? And that only owners do that. Only the rich do that. Okay? They turn wealth, they turn stuff from consumable into investment stuff. And you've got to explain how investment stuff is the same as consumable stuff, because it isn't. Consumers consume things. They eat stuff. All right? And they produce stuff. The rich glean profit off of stuff. And to do what they want to do, they end up putting stuff, they end up locking it away from consumption. It doesn't become consumable, because they will only activate the stuff when the stuff can be put towards some mission that will acquire profit. They won't allow the stuff to be consumed, is the bottom line. And it's consumption that should be driving an economy. That provides for full employment. And as soon as you cut consumption off and you only allow the rich man to do the consuming, then you'll only have a job building a pyramid. You'll have all unproductive work. You'll have lots of people that are very good at gold plating toilets, but nobody that can make your internet work. No one will get electricity to your house. No one will get food to your house. Okay? You'll just have a bunch of bullshit labor that doesn't do society one fucking bit of fucking good. And that's where we're heading fast, because now the rich own everything, including the value of all our labor for the next 2 decades. And so this is just bullshit to say they're not the goddamn problem. They are the definition of why this is unsustainable. You can live with some blights on a society. You can live with some ticks, some parasites. You just can't allow the parasites to become bigger than you. You can't allow the parasites to be extracting more blood than you can produce. And that's what we've allowed to fucking happen. We've allowed the ownership to migrate entirely to these very few hands, and all consumption now to be taxed by this demand for profit. So fuck you. I mean, you're just not making the argument, in my opinion. You're just missing the whole fucking point. This isn't some inevitable crash. This is a crash provoked because of the migration of ownership into a very few hands. And it's a crash that happened before because of the same reason. It's not just a coincidence that in 1929 the equation of ownership was just as dramatically pitiful as it is now. This 8,000 households owning as much as 65 million Americans. Yeah, we're back to the same stupid, idiotic situation.